are 7 reasons you should consider taking the SAT over the ACT. Reason number 7, no essay. This year the College Board got rid of it, and the essay on the ACT is technically voluntary. There are 2 reasons you're going to probably take it. Reason number 1, 10% of colleges require it if you're going to submit an ACT score to them. Number 2 is, I think we're all like, well, what are they going to think if I don't actually submit the essay? Can I even put pen to paper when it matters under time conditions? Who wrote my college essay, right? It's a way that we're going to try to prove them wrong, even if writing the essay in that 50-minute time period is not our strong suit. And more than that, even if we are good at writing essays within those conditions, the grading is subjective. You can have 2 people grade, one is going to give a 6, one is going to give a 5. And more than that, it's one less thing that we have to focus on. So let's go ahead and leave our essay to the college admission, where we could use Microsoft Word, grammar, spelling check, all those fun stuff. Number 6 on our list, the time crunch. So here's a breakdown, but in roughly the same amount of time, the SAT has 154 questions to the ACT's whopping 215. Let's use the percentage change formula with going to say what percentage more is ACT compared to SAT. So SAT is going to be our initial amount, ACT is our final amount. Know this formula for these, particularly the SAT math test, although you will see it on the ACT as well. So let's take our final. Final amount is 215, that's ACT. Initial is 154. We're going to put that in parentheses, subtract, put that over initial of 154. We get a whopping 39.6% more questions on the ACT compared to the SAT. The ACT is a speed run more than anything else, so we can practice, but there is going to be a ceiling on our capabilities. With the SAT, our ceiling is only as well as we understand the material. Time is not going to be a factor. Let's look at the math section under reasons 5, 4, and 3. Reason number 5, the scope of the math section. For SAT, we have to know and understand the big 3 formulas. Those are linear, exponential, and quadratic. When I say know and understand, I mean know and understand graphically, right? How it's represented on the graph, the XY intercepts as applicable, the vertex in a quadratic. We have to know formulaically, knowing all the components, remembering these on our sleep. We have to be able to understand conceptually as well as, right, so in English as well as in math, what we do with the various components. And finally, conceptually, looking at a word problem, being able to recognize, well, what sort of growth is it? Is it going to be exponential? Is it linear? And then translating that into the formulas that we know and love. Algebra, right? So on the basic level, solve for x. We know that since the 6th grade, but we could get a little bit more complicated problems with cross multiplication, with the denominator, with the rules of exponents. We have to know basic geometry and trigonometry. For geometry, those formulas are very conveniently listed on the first page of each section. For each math section. And trigonometry, basically you have to know SOHCAHTOA. Central tendency, mean, median, mode, standard deviation, and range. Not how to compute the standard deviation, that's a complicated formula, but just what it means more generally. And that's pretty much about it. It's probably 95 to 100% of the material in any given SAT math section. Now you can get like a one-off about like a 3rd degree polynomial or something like that, but that is very much going to be the exception, not the rule. Now in the ACT, you have to know all of that, but wait, there's more. Matrices, sequences, more advanced trigonometry, like law of sine, and they will include that formula. That's one formula they give. Much more difficult geometry. Now for those that found geometry, whether you took it in 9th or 10th grade, you found that difficult, don't take the ACT, stop the video, make sure to subscribe first, and go ahead and sign yourself up for the SAT. 20% of the math section is going to be geometry on the ACT. And you don't have any of those formulas that were listed on the SAT. You have to know scientific notation, logarithms. Now, there's not a whole lot with the exception of geometry in each one of these, but ultimately it's more material to memorize and more, again, on a 60-minute sprint, you have to be able to do these in your sleep, and it's a lot of material to remember on test day. Reason number 4, the multiple choice options. Now, they work fundamentally different on the SAT compared to the ACT. Now, admit there's a caveat. There are 13 free answer choices on the SAT. On the ACT, all are multiple choice. However, the multiple choice works differently, as said, in 2 ways. Way number 1, the ACT makes it so that if you make any error, and that could be a computational error, that could be a conceptual error, you misunderstand the problem, so they're going to do their darnest to give you a choice that reflects your mistake, and bam, they got you, right? On the SAT, that is true to some extent, but more often than not, they are not trying to confuse you, and they're just trying to help you, as we'll discuss in reason number 2. So let's go ahead and look at a multiple choice example on the ACT and the SAT. So first, this is the ACT, question 47, so we know this is going to be a little bit more towards the end of the test. A room has a rectangular floor that is 15 feet by 21 feet. What is the area of the floor in square yards? So most people are going to be like, okay, let me figure out the area of the floor in square feet, and then I'm going to convert that to yards. So let me do area of a rectangle, length times width. This is easy. 15 times 21. Okay, use my calculator. I get 315. I did that before. And now I'm going to go ahead and convert that to feet. The question is, how do I convert that? What do I divide it by? Well, 3 feet per yard, so I divide that by 3, get D, 105. Perfect. Let me move on to 48. That was easy. Wrong. That is incorrect, right? Why is that incorrect? Because we're not converting from feet to yards, we're converting from square feet to square yards. So I need to square both sides. I square the yards, that's 1 yard, so that's just 1 yard squared. And now I square the left side, well, I square the feet. I did that right, but I have to square the 3 as well, right? Remember the rules of exponents. You have to square the components within if two are multiplied times one another. So that's going to get 9. I divide by 9, and I get B. Now that's really the trick or the pivot point of this question. 36 is given, well, it's close to 35, happens to be a perfect square. 144 is given as well. Maybe 24 is a math error that you did. Now, let's look at a problem on the SAT and see how they would address a conceptual mistake that was made. So in the xy plane, the graph of 2x squared minus 6x plus 2y squared plus 2y equals 45 is a circle. What is the radius of the circle? So I see this mess of a formula, and I know that this is the formula for a circle. Yes, and that will actually show up on the SAT as well. Now, without getting too much into the gory details, let's go ahead and look at the right side, and I know that should be radius squared. So what is the radius? Easy peasy. Take the square root of 45. Answer what? Wait a minute, it's not there. What do I do? Now I know A is not right, and I know B is not the square root of 45, right? Because it would have to end in 0.25. So I must have done something wrong. I go ahead, sure enough, look at the left, and like, oh, I'm so silly. That's not in the form of a circle. That's I have to go ahead and complete the square first, doing duh, right? And x, that's a joke. X minus h, right, squared, and go ahead and complete the square, add that to the right side, and that is my answer. I take the square root of that and move on. Now, if this was on the ACT, you better bet that they are going to list square root of 45 as an answer. You will get it wrong if you made that error, right? So just a difference between the two. The second difference, so not only do the answers on the SAT not designed to trick you, they're designed to help you in certain circumstances. Now, I don't mean as far as plugging in. Yes, that is an option. That is the last ditch option. In very, very, very rare circumstances, there was a quadratic problem on maybe a test in March that comes to mind. We had to find the maximum value within a word problem, and the best way to do that was plugging in the answers. But that is very much the exception. The general rule is you want to try to solve the problem and then look at the answers. Or at least start to solve the problem, as we'll discuss. Now, what they may do, and you'll see this in the non-calculator section really towards the beginning, is they'll give you a shortcut. So take a regular graph, and you're asked to find the equation of the line y equals mx plus b. You want to find m, you want to find b, the slope and the y-intercept. So the easiest thing to do is go ahead right away, look not the slope, look at the y-intercept, look at the y-axis, find it, and boom, let's say it's 3. Now, okay, I know how to do this. I know how to find m. I'm either going to plug in a point, I'm going to do rise over run, I'm going to count that out, whatever it is. I go ahead, spend 35 seconds or so on it, and get my answer. Now I go through them, and I realize that, and the answer is b, let's say. I realize that A, C, and D did not have 3 as the y-intercept, so I did not even have to do the second step. So this is often a trick with these problems, is you go ahead, you solve half of it, particularly with the example that I just gave, and then you could actually figure out the solution based on the remaining multiple choice options. With the ACT, they try to make the multiple choice options as similar as possible, so this is not often the case. Number 3, the non-calculator section. Okay, so you're thinking ACT finally scored a point, right? You're allowed a calculator on the whole section, right? And we broke the shutout. Wrong. The non-calculator section doesn't really need that much mental math. Now, there is some that you have to need, and I'm going to list a different app for Apple, a different app for Android users. The one for Apple costs, the one for Android is free. Go Android. And you need to learn, I would say, 12 by 12s. You need to learn your squares, probably your perfect squares. 15 times 15, probably you want to know, maybe till 20, be able to recall those on the test. But that's really about it. And there's very little, the most pen and paper wise, you're probably going to need to do double digit multiplication. I will say a caveat, you need to be able to convert a decimal over a fraction into a fraction. So like 0.2 over 3, you need to be able to convert that to a fraction. That's pretty much it for the mental math. Now on the ACT, it's not only that if you want any chance of finishing the section in 60 minutes or even doing, with all within our limits, most of the questions are good at, whatever percent you're looking to within 60 minutes, you have to be able to nail down that same mental math, if not a little bit more complicated than you would do on the SAT. And it's worse because on the ACT, some of you're going to get like bizarre decimals and really nasty numbers that you absolutely need to use a calculator for. It's very rare, even on the calculator section in the SAT, that you need to use a calculator. So we're on the ACT, we're at a disadvantage because number one, I'm going to need to use the calculator. Number two, I need to not use the calculator on certain problems if I want any chance of finishing this on time. Whereas in the SAT, those questions are going to be much more conceptual in the non-calculator section, and you're going to be using that mental math as needed. Number two, let's talk about science. So technically there is a science section on the ACT, but in reality there is neither a science section nor on the not on the SAT, neither on the SAT, nor on, that's a mouthful, neither on the SAT nor on the ACT. That's because the, quote, science section on the ACT is a twisted form of reading comprehension. It's a 6-passage, 40-question, 35-minute, horror-awful sprint where you are certainly not given enough time to read the passages, and you are barely given enough time to glance at the graphs, if we could even call them that. If you've tried to do the science section, you know what I'm talking about, and you have to jump right to the questions without getting your bearings. It can be prepared for, but even if you do, there's always at least one unique graph, diagram, flowchart, for lack of a better word, that is designed there specifically to confuse you. And if you're really stressed out and it's the last one, and you shoot, I looked at the time, I have only 4 minutes to get to 7 questions, I can't make heads or tails out of this thing, it can be really, really tricky and a way to very quickly decrease your score. Moreover, and that's a really good transition word for grammar section, right? I'm saying an additional component, additional reason that the science section is terrible. Even if the graphs were beautiful, elegant, instead of the trash heaps that they are, the less to prepare for, the better. We saw this with the essay section. The less you have to focus on when it comes to the standardized test, the better, right? We want to be the master of few trades, not the jack of all. We want to be the master of reading, writing, and English as it pertains to the SAT section. Let's get rid of the really skills that we're never going to use, that science section and that essay under time conditions. When it comes to the real world, you're going to have time to. You're never going to submit a first draft like that. Reason number one, and this is kind of taking parts of all that we mentioned before, cheating a little bit, but it's okay. The SAT is just a lot easier to prepare for and to study for and to ultimately improve your grade, which is what you're trying to do when you study, at least, unless you're sadistic and you just like studying for the SAT because you have nothing better to do, right? On the SAT, you have more time. So yes, the questions, especially in the English and the writing section, can be a little bit trickier, but you have more time to think about them. And, if you've really studied well, you're going to get through possibly 30 or maybe even 40 or 50% of the test really, really quickly, for any given section really quickly. And then you're going to be able to spend time not only on reviewing, which we'll discuss, but, you could spend 3, 4, 5 minutes on a question potentially and get it right. On the ACT, under no circumstances are you going to be able to spend 5 minutes on a question. That is a sure way to get 3 to 4 wrong or just not get to them later. As far as reviewing, personally, I am very susceptible to careless errors, and they could be careless errors, computational errors, they can be careless errors, just misreading a problem, conceptual errors, and they could be embarrassingly transcription errors. I fill in the wrong bubble, doing. There is no reason for that ever to happen on the SAT. You are given, again, if studied for properly, you are given plenty of time to circle back and review everything. I will regularly catch, 2 math errors or so on a second go through. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and comment. Good luck studying, and good luck on test day.